You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your VIXs and your Tesla and your SPY options and look a little bit farther afield, see what's going on in the world of crypto. Going to talk the Bitcoin, the ETH, a lot of the other altcoin, of course, the spot, the futures, the options, the volume, the volatility, the SKEW, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. Remember, all these analytics coming at you today, courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. You can find out more for yourselves. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires, I should say, on all of the interesting analytics we're going to discuss on the show. Speaking of discussing interesting things on the show today, we've got a great one for you. So many of you have been just deluging us with questions about all things ProShares, Bitcoin ETF. We thought we'd go right to the source. So let's get to it with the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the show where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto derivatives and indeed beyond, and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And next up on the show is a newcomer to the program and indeed to the network. He is SIMEON HYMAN, the global investment strategist at ProShares. SIMEON, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thanks for having me.
And SIMEON, as we are wont to do with all of our first-timers here on the network, give our audience a bit of an overview of your background in the financial and indeed ETF world, as well as what it is that the global investment strategist does day to day over there at ProShares.
Well, I've been around asset and wealth management for about 25 years. I've been at ProShares for almost 8 years now, and just real excited to be running the investment strategy group here at ProShares. We're an ETF firm overall. We actually have a few mutual funds too. We've got over $70 billion in our sister firm, ProFunds. We've got over $70 billion of assets, and my team is in charge of creating all the clever word these days, content. So we want to make sure that everybody knows how our ETFs are constructed, how they're likely to behave in different market environments, how you might use them in your portfolio and in your investment process. And we are the tip of the spear in that regard, if you will.
I like that. Well, we got the right guy on the show here today because, Simeon, we have been fielding a lot of questions about your ProShares BITO product. We have a lot to get to. First off, I'm just curious for you. Obviously, this was a much anticipated launch, but did it exceed even your expectations? It seems like everyone and their mother was talking about this thing over the course of the past few weeks, Simeon.
I have to say, I've been in this business for a long time, and being on the floor of the exchange when we launched was really, really exciting. And we are obviously very pleased. I'm not sure. I wouldn't go so far as to say shocked. I was listening to some of the audio as we were in my personal green room here, and the very thing that makes Bitcoin important also makes it a little bit challenging to invest in. And we think we really did solve a lot of that by creating a ETF that simply works in your brokerage account and that belt and suspenders of being in the regulated futures market and in a plain old 1940s regulated act ETF. There are a lot of people who are waiting for that.
A lot of people are waiting for this conversation too. Let's get to it. Like I said, we've got so many questions about this product. It's surprising to me how many times we've received this first one, Simeon. It seemed like kind of the obvious choice to me to go with the futures, but it seemed like a lot of people were taken aback by that. Why you guys went with the futures over there at CME versus the quote unquote pure play of the spot. You may be tired of answering this question, but let's do it one more time for our audience here today. Why did you guys opt for the futures over there at CME versus the spot?
Sure. So listen, we're never tired of answering this question. Of course, many of you who've been watching this have been paying attention to the regulatory regime, which indicated a stance that was favorable towards the use of the futures market. But what we want to point out is that favorability is aligned with what we think are really the key benefits of the futures. Not only are they a regulated place, it's almost impossible to manipulate things there. The CFTC regulates the clearinghouse, so there's no counterparty risk. There's nothing weird that can really happen there. But also there's increasing studies that are showing that price realization, and that just simply means the speed by which information is translated into prices, is actually a little bit more efficient in that futures market. That CME futures market actually trades more volume than the largest U.S. Bitcoin exchange. So there are a lot of benefits to the futures market, not just the fact that it was getting acceptance from a regulatory point of view, but the structure itself, we think, is a very effective and important opportunity for folks looking for a way to invest in Bitcoin that leaves some of the stuff behind. Some people might want to take that on. Cold wallets, warm wallets, exchanges. There are many exchanges. I don't have to tell everybody listening to this, but it solves for a lot of those issues.
Futures, as you mentioned, they solve a lot of issues. They also bring some interesting new issues into the fold, which have been the subject of much debate over the past couple of weeks. Let's start with the position limits. Obviously, this has been a lot of talk. This fund, as you mentioned, this ETF has been wildly popular. I mean, it's been top of mind for everyone. I can't remember an option being listed this quickly after the launch of a new product. So clearly there's a lot of interest in this. And of course, that manifested itself pretty quickly into you guys bumping up against the position limits for the Bitcoin futures over there at CME. So a lot of people, Simeon, are worried that these position limits are going to hamper this ETF going forward. You guys are going to come up against them and maybe start moving out of the front month and farther down the futures curve, which will, of course, present maybe some tracking issues and perhaps also even into other related crypto investments. So what do you have to say to the folks out there who are maybe worried about the position limits, perhaps this product getting too popular for its own good, Simeon?
Indeed. So I want to walk people through because a lot of people get the numbers wrong here. So first, we just had a doubling of the front month contract limit, and that's now 4,000 contracts. I think this is an audience where everybody probably knows everything I'm about to say. Remember, that's 5 Bitcoins per contract. So that front month limit was actually doubled. Now, very importantly, there is a 5,000 contract accountability level for other contracts. So that's on top of the 4,000, and that's not a limit. That just means you might have a conversation, but that's not actually a limit. So that's a lot of extra room. And then beyond that, you can actually potentially apply for an exemption, which we think we would qualify for. So there's a lot of room there. People get this math wrong. Importantly, too, some of the research that we've done, if you look historically, absolutely that front month has a correlation and a beta that's dead on spot. Something like 0.99, very, very high to spot. But actually, if you go to that second month, it has a really high, it has a very similar correlation and beta to spot too. So if you have to go to that second month, nothing really weird tends to happen. People have experience with futures curves, if you will, in other areas of commodities and other places where that's not necessarily true, where if you go further out into the future, contracts can have different sensitivities to spot. But the evidence is that even if you go to that second month, that you're still behaving just like spot.
So you're not concerned then that the popularity of this product will force you down the futures curve and that we'll see maybe a demonstrably different product in the near future. I think a lot of this concern obviously stems from what we saw happen to USO last year with that dramatic inversion in the WTI market. And the USO that emerged from that product was a very different beast than the one that went into that. You don't foresee something similar happening from a structural perspective here to BITO going forward?
No, see, it's a great point because people, and of course, I'm running out. I ran out of fingers and toes over the last month or so with regards to how many times I had to talk about USO. But that there's a physical delivery there, and it can go negative. That's what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. That can't happen in CME Bitcoin futures. There's only cash settlement. So weird things like USO-like things really can't happen. So it's important, number one, to get the math right, that it's the 5,000, which isn't even a limit, is on top of the 4,000. And number two, that if you go out to that next month, the correlation and the betas have held up historically quite well.
So then just to summarize for some of our listeners, if you have to move farther down the futures curve, you think the correlation will still be there, and that also you think CME is more than willing to work with you guys if you do continue this popularity to maybe adjust limits out there to make sure the fund can stay viable going forward here, Simeon.
Yep.
Just wanted to clarify that for our audience there. And, one of the other things that's getting a lot of play out there in the BITO world is, of course, the conversation. By the way, I call it BITO all the time. Do you call it BITO, BITO? How do you refer to it, Simeon?
I think we're going with BITO because it's Bitcoin.
Okay, BITO, I can see that. Somehow it just went with BITO with me for some reason.
I've heard a lot of BITOs. I think we decided to go BITO, but I don't know if we've had a formal meeting of the decision makers.
We need an official clarification on that.
Yes.
Otherwise,
we'll see if we put out a press release clarifying the preferred pronunciation.
I'll be looking for that after the show. We'll go with BITO for now. It makes sense, certainly, given the origins of the product. But also in the prospectus, you mentioned if for some reason you do need to keep extending the positions out there, you can also start adding in some equities with crypto exposure. Do you foresee that happening anytime in the near future? And if so, if that were to happen, do you have any equities you can give us in terms of what types of equities you guys would be adding to this going forward?
Yeah, I think we're pretty far away from that, but I don't have any specificity with regards to what equities in that regard, but we got a lot of room.
So you're not too worried about having to add all these other products. People want something that's going to track, obviously, with Bitcoin. And if it's not tracking, then obviously it's not going to be as attractive for a lot of people out there. So not worried about the equities coming in and spoiling the party yet, Simeon. That's good to hear. Another thing that people are interested in, again, I haven't heard this many people talking about negative roll yield, perhaps in my life, as I have since the launch of your product. So well done there, Simeon. You guys have kicked some esoteric aspects of the future world into the common parlance there, which is good. A lot of people are interested in talking about and asking us about what's going on from a roll yield impact. Obviously, when you're buying futures farther down the curve, typically you have a contango setup out there in a lot of these futures. You do see that in Bitcoin as well, even though the structure does evolve a little bit. It's a little bit different than some of the other futures we've been seeing out there. But traditionally, you're going out and buying a future farther down the term structure, which is more expensive, and then selling it when it gets towards the front month when it's cheaper. And that ends up having some sort of drag on the returns. Now, the early calculations I've seen, SIMEON, are somewhere in the ballpark of about 1% a month. So you're talking roughly 12% a year as a drag. Does that line up with what you're seeing and what you guys were expecting out there, SIMEON, those numbers?
Well, I'll give you a few. I'll give you a couple of framing statistics. So let's first look recently. The month of September was actually much smaller than that. So I like the way you explained it in a very effective way, because you said what the number was and then you annualized it, because sometimes people hear the annualized number and they think that's the current difference. So thank you for explaining that with the two pieces. But the month of September was actually much smaller. On a daily basis, the average difference was 20 basis points, which would have annualized to about 2.5%. The long-term average has been on an annualized basis more like around 5. So it has been a little bit elevated since the launch, but we actually think that's probably a little bit higher than it'll end up being. Again, that longer-term average is somewhere around 5%. And if anything, with the additional participation in the futures market, with all that volume, and by the way, there's also the significant volume in options on BITO. So that's an important development too. I think everybody, given the audience here, this is an important development. The fact that there are OCC options on BITO is an important development. We think that will bring more efficiency and likely bring down that roll cost over time. But yeah, it's been a little bit higher since we launched. The long-term average annualized about 5%, but that month of September was even only half that, about 2.5%. And we think that, again, in those ranges, it's not a terrible deal when you think about some of the other ways to invest. The trust thing, the thing that trades over the counter that everybody knows on in your audience, that's gone from a premium to a discount that's a heck of a lot wider than that. So it's something that I think people should be educated to, but I hope I gave people a few different historical numbers just to put it in perspective.
Well, that is a good point about the options. Since the inception of this show, which is well over 2 years ago now, people have been asking us for options they could put in their securities account here in the U.S. to trade crypto. And of course, their choices were few and far between. They had LedgerX approved here in the U.S. Obviously, most of our U.S. audience can't go out there on trade on Deribit, so that limited how many options, quote unquote, they had in their portfolio. So this launch of now I'm going to start calling it BITO as well. The BITO options, of course, were much more attractive to a lot of our audience for that reason. They now had an options alternative they could use in their securities account. By the way, I mentioned I was surprised. Were you surprised there, SIMEON, at just how quickly they listed options on these? To my knowledge, this is the fastest a turnaround from launch of a new product to options listing, I think, in the history of OCC.
I was simply going to say that we were really, really pleased that the options went up, almost instantaneously, and the volume's been there from the get-go. Again, you said it right away. People have been looking for an options alternative, and options on BITO is an important alternative, bringing more efficiency and opportunity into this. I hate that term ecosystem, but it's kind of what it is.
Well, it is quite the robust ecosystem right now. I'm looking at the numbers right now. The ADV is up to 61,000, blowing the doors off of that today, nearly 2x, 111,000 contracts on the tape, 80,000 calls, as you might imagine, very call heavy, 30,000 puts. Of course, Bitcoin flirting with some new all-time levels out there today. We'll get to that a little bit later in the Bitcoin breakdown. And people always want to know about what's next. That's always the question we get after a big product launches is what's next? So what's in the hopper? What do you guys have up your sleeves over there at ProShares? Could we perhaps be looking at an ETH ETF next there, SIMEON?
Well, I'm going to give the answer I'm going to give. First, I will start with, of course, our history of innovation at ProShares, which is very sincere. We actually had our first Bitcoin ETF filing back in 2017. So we want to make sure that we are, right there on not the bleeding edge, but the cutting edge, to make sure that we are watching the evolution of the crypto market, of DeFi, and of the regulatory environment. And as soon as we see something that we think is an opportunity that will be a valuable solution for investors, we'll be sure to be on it, but we don't have anything specific to mention at this time.
Another question we've received quite a bit that maybe you could shine some light on for our audience is the people who were surprised that you guys went with the futures versus the spot. No, their next question is, do we think we'll see a spot ETF anytime soon? Obviously, you guys over there at ProShares have been in this space for a while. You mentioned your first application was back in 2017. So you've been engaging with the regulators on this front for a while as well. What are your thoughts, maybe ballpark terms, Simeon, for when a lot of our audience out there can expect something on the spot in terms of an ETF?
Yeah, on this one, we don't know anything that anybody else. We don't know anything that anyone else doesn't know. So we really don't know how that's going to evolve. But I would just go back to the thoughts I was sharing at the top of the of our program, which is that we really don't think the futures are a second order choice. This is an important choice that has many important attributes, particularly that perhaps better price discovery and the regulatory aspect of the futures market that make it far from a way station along the way, but an important destination.
So what I'm hearing from you, Simeon, if I could read between the lines, is no Shiba Inu ETF coming anytime in the near future.
As I said, we're watching it. I'm not sure that would be the next thing we would do, but you take it all seriously in this business because innovation these days we know is happening at a pace that will only accelerate. So you see these things and you want to give it the side eye, but there's a lot of innovation happening, and we track it all and we take it all very seriously.
Well, Simeon, I appreciate you joining us today in the Crypto Hot Seat to give our audience some more insights into this uber popular product. But before you go, if there's anything we didn't discuss on the show today, or perhaps anything you want to leave our audience with in terms of this super hot BITO product, now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Anything you want to know is on ProShares.com. Education is really important from our perspective. So just head up to ProShares.com, and we've got lots of material to make sure that that you can become as educated as you need to be to make important investment decisions.
Well, again, Simeon, I appreciate you joining us. Given the popularity of this product, I have a feeling this isn't the last time you and I are going to be chatting, sir. So appreciate you joining us, and we'll look forward to your next chat, perhaps with some hot new products coming out of ProShares in the near future, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, now we have to keep on rolling, listeners. It's that time of the program. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down everything going on in the world of Bitcoin. By the way, how'd you like that Crypto Hot? So you folks have been hitting us up with questions left and right about all things BITO. I need to beat that into my brain. BITO. For some reason, I got on the BITO tangent and it's just stuck. But BITO is the way we're going here going forward. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that straight from the horse's mouth in terms of how things are going on. It doesn't sound like they're too concerned about the position limits out there, which is a good thing because no one wants a repeat of USO out there again. But let's get on out there to the world of all things Bitcoin this week. And as I mentioned, looking pretty good for the Bitcoin bulls out there. Coming into showtime, we were just a tick shy, just a little bit shy of the 66,000 level, 65,853. That's quite the rally from last week where we were just a little bit shy of the 60,000 level, up about 52, almost 5,300 handles from this time last week. So quite the run. We had a range of, like I said, on our last show, about just threatening to break 60K, not quite getting there, and getting up to about 66,500 earlier today, actually. So it's been quite the range. A little over 6,000 handles on the week out there. In terms of volatility, even though we had a decent range out there, still seeing vol continuing to trend lower. It was about an 84% on our last show, coming into today's show at about an 80%. So still frothy, still volatile, but not quite the north of triple digit level some people expect when they hear the term Bitcoin thrown around. BitVol, which is, of course, the Bitcoin VIX created by our friend over there, Simon Ho at T3. You can find it for yourself. T3index.com is the place to go for that. He's just on the show a couple of weeks ago. On our last show, BitVol is at about a 91.25 coming into this show. Again, continuing this trend of slowly evolving to the downside there at about a 90.5. SKEW-wise coming into the show. Last week, it was at about a 2.6. This week has come in a bit, about 1.1. And we've seen something similar out there on Simon's newly launched BitSkew index. It was at about an 88.25 on our last show. Coming into this show, it was at about an 3/4. So we're seeing vol coming in and we're seeing SKEW coming in over there on the Bitcoin options this week. In terms of open interest, what kind of size are we seeing out there open in Bitcoin options? Again, this is back out on the big venue, which is Deribit. The calls were up to about 131,000 contracts open. It's up about 8,000 from this time last week. And the puts are at about 60,000, up about 5,000 from this time last week. So you can see more than 2-to-1 calls versus puts out there, which still shows it's pretty much all calls all the time, whether you're looking at Deribit, whether you're looking at the options on BITO, all calls all the time out there. In terms of OI, where are you folks lining up from an expiration perspective out there? Well, it's still December, leading the dance, closing in on 90,000 contracts right now, about 88,700, puts it up about 3,700 from this time last week. Number two, a distant number two with only 37,000 contracts, is November, and that's up about 7,000 from this time last week. And followed far in number three with March, a little bit shy of 20,000 contracts, up about 800 from this time last week. In terms of the notional value of that Bitcoin that's open on all of these venues out there, we had about 11 billion worth of notional value open last week, and this week it's about 12 billion, ticked up a little bit, as you've seen. Again, a little bit of a march north in Bitcoin and a little bit more options on the tape, so all that combining to boost that number over there. In terms of that volume, let's dive into it a little bit. Pretty active week out there on Deribit. Remember this summer we were talking about 150, 200 million worth of notional volume going up day in, day out on Deribit. Very quiet period. We're well past that now. We saw multiple days this past week over the 1 billion threshold, 1.3 billion on the 8th, 1.1 billion on the 5th. So again, a very active day today as well. 1.3 billion already on the tape. So probably going to see more than that by the end of the day. So active week out there. In terms of where you folks are lining up from a position perspective, what are the size open positions in Bitcoin options right now? If you said the 100,000 strike was still leading the dance this week, you are the winner chicken dinner. 14,000 contracts open on the 100K, aka the par strike. That's up about 1,000 from this time last week. Number two, the 70,000 strike has 13,000 contracts open. That's actually down about 1,000 from this time last week. Number three, the 80,000 strike that has 11,000 contracts open. That's up about 1,000. Number four, the 120,000 strike has exactly 10,000 contracts open. It's up about 800 from this time last week. And that doesn't do it for you. That doesn't excite you. That doesn't stir your blood. How about the 200,000 strike coming in at number five with 7,500 contracts open? It's up about 200 from this time last week. So a little bit of evolution. The 100,000 strike taking the top spot this week. Let's see if it can hold it. In terms of the options over there on CME, remember we were just talking about the futures on CME and how active they have been in the immediate post BITO launch out there. We saw the futures lighting it up. We saw the options lighting it up. We've seen some of that dialing back, expiration taking some of the OI with it as well. The open interest in the options over there at CME, it's down quite a bit, down nearly 700 contracts to about 912 out there right now. So we are seeing a lot of that coming off the board. And the options, futures, same deal. The OI was down nearly 2,000 contracts to about 13,300. Also a pretty quiet end to the week, only about 3,900 contracts on the tape on Friday. So that immediate explosion of post-BITO volume seems like it's quieting down a little bit. Same thing out there in the micro Bitcoin futures. We've seen a lot of OI go the way of the dodo out there. Over 40,000 contracts coming off the tape there with about 21, almost 22,000 contracts open. In the micro Bitcoin futures, it was over 60,000 this time last week. So a lot of contracts going away over there on CME as we keep on rolling right on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everyone, welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show we break down what the heck is lighting up the top 10 out there from an overall market cap perspective. You know what number two is? It's ETH. Let's break down the rest of the top 10. Actually, our producers got silly out here. They made it a top 11 this week. Why did they do that? Well, the much ballyhooed, much vaunted, much maligned Shiba Inu coin coming in at 30, almost 30.5 billion at number 11. So we'll extend it this week because so many of you love it and indeed love to hate it in the same breath. Number 10, the actual top 10 now. We've got USD coin at 34.3 billion. Number 9, a similarly infamous. Which one is more hated and or loved now? Is it Doge or has Shiba stolen all of its thunder out there? I don't know, but Doge is a little bit higher on the list this week at number 9 with 36.6 billion. It's up to 27 cents out there, almost 28 cents. So nice little run out there for Doge. Number 8, Polkadot, 53 billion. Number 7, XRP, 59.25 billion. Number 6, Cardano, north of 70 billion now, 70.5 billion. Number 5, it's Tether at 72.5 billion. Number 4, Solana, this thing back on the upswing again, up to almost 250. That puts it up to about 75.6 billion worth of market cap. Number 3, Binance Coin, 108 billion worth of market cap. Numero 2 there, it's ETH at 565 billion, closing in on 5,000, 47.81 out there when we crunch these numbers. And number 1, of course, the big dog, Bitcoin. When we crunched this list, it was north of 66,000, 6630 out there. So that puts it at about 1.2, almost 1.2.5 trillion worth of market cap. Let's get on out to the number 2 out there, which was ETH coming into showtime. Was at a 47.54. Very lofty level out there for ETH. That's nearly 500 points to the north from where it was this time last week at a 42.85. So nice run, 470 handles from this time last week. We've seen a run up to about 47.94. That's where it hit today. So new highs out there in ETH this morning, and a low a couple of days ago on the 6th at 43.33. So quite the range. And actually, even though on our last show, it was actually 42.85. So the low would be about 42.85 from where it was on our show last week. Coming into the ETH on the show from a vol perspective, we're seeing ETH right now at about a 94%. That puts it down about 7 points from where it was this time last week. Remember, last week we were just north of the triple digit level at 101%. So still frothy, still very volatile. 94% is nothing to sneeze at, but of course a little bit lighter than it was this time last week. SKEW wise, we saw a little bit of an increase to the SKEW last week. It was at about a 5.1. Right now it's holding firm at about a 7. So ticking up a little bit out there from a SKEW perspective. OI wise, let's go out to Deribit. See, that's again the big venue for ETH options as well. Calls north of 1 million again, almost 1.1 million contracts open on the call front, about 1.09 million. That's up nearly 50,000 contracts from this time last week. The puts at about 422,000. It's up about 36,000. So you're closing in on 3-to-1 calls over puts out there in ETH. So even more call heavy than Bitcoin is ETH right now. In terms of the notional value of said OI, even though we've seen ETH on a run, a nice tier since last week, we've seen that OI pretty much holding firm at about 6 billion from this time last week. In terms of volume, though, we have seen some pretty active days, even though no 1 billion days coming across the radar. Today could make it, though. Coming into showtime, there was already 574 million worth of notional volume on the tape just before showtime. So that has a chance of hitting the 1B level today. We also saw action on the 2nd, so right after our last show, 581 million with the volume changing hands that day. And on the 3rd, with 454 million. The rest of the days were substantially lighter out there. So sparks of interest, sparks of activity out there over the course of the past week. In terms of where you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective in ETH options, it's still all December all the time. ETH has always been more quarterly heavy than Bitcoin anyway, and we're seeing that in stark relief right now. DECE at about 571,000 contracts. It's up about 13,000 from this time last week, followed by number 2, March, 290,000. It's up about 14,000 from this time last week. And then a distant number 3 is November, 215,000 contracts, up about 21,000. DECE still the runaway leader out there. And in terms of where you folks are lining up from a strike perspective, what are the size open positions in Bitcoin, I should say, in ETH options right now? It's the 5,000 strike still leading the dance, getting much closer than it was this time last week. That's got about 105,000 contracts, opens up about 3,000 from this time last week, followed by the 10K strike with about 95,000 contracts, opens up about 3,000 from this time last week, followed by number 3, the 15,000 strike. It's got about 93,000 contracts, opens up about 10,000 from this time last week. We've seen pretty much opening across the board in all the top positions in ETH this week. Number 4, 6,000. That's at about 75,000 contracts open. It's up about 3,000 from last week. And rounding out the top 5 sizable positions in ETH options this week, the 5,500 strike that has about 54,000 contracts open. It's up about 7,000 contracts from this time last week. And all of you who think, I even put it to them earlier in the show in the hot seat, all of you who think the ETH ETF may be next out there from CME, they are talking about micro ETH futures. Those have listed since the last time we chatted here. So actually, those are coming up, I should say, on December 6th. They've been announced since our last show. So there are some workings over there at CME that may make you think they are leaning in that direction. Right now, though, the volume in ETH future is pretty light. The OI is down to about 5,100. It's down about 100 from this time last week, and there were about 2,000 contracts on the tape on Friday. So kind of a light day, light time out there in ETH future. Let's move on out to some of the other altcoin you folks are always bombarding us about these days. Let's get out to XRP, back up over $1, up to about $1.25 in XRP land, puts it up about 17 cents from this time last week. Doge, good old Doge, coming to Showtime is actually north of 28 cents, 28.2. That's up a little over about 1 1/3 cents from this time last week. So nice little run for all you Doge heads out there. Litecoin, again, kind of got back on the radar again after that whole big pump and dump out there with Walmart trading 226, almost 227 coming into Showtime. It's up about 34, nearly 35 handles. So nice run out there in Litecoin. Let's get out some of the other ones you guys like to watch. Like I mentioned, Cardano, nice little run out there as well. 209 coming into Showtime, puts it up. It was about $1.94 since on our show last week's up about 15 cents from this time last week. Polkadot, another one on our radar out there, in and out of the top 10 most days and most weeks out there. Coming into Showtime's at about 53.5. That puts it up a little over 5 points, about 5.1 handles from this time last week. It was trading about 48.30 on our show last week. And Solana coming into Showtime again. Nice run out there. It was at 246.5 when we kicked off the show. That puts it up 46, nearly 47 handles. It was shy of 200, if ever so slightly, on our show last week, 199.5. So Solana continuing its march north. What an impressive year it has been for Solana out there. And we can't get out of the altcoin universe without talking about the much maligned Shiba Inu coin. It's actually down since our last show. On our last show, it was 0.000071. And coming into today's show, 0.000055. So that puts it down a wee bit since our last show, even though if you look and extend that frame of reference out a few months, obviously, Shiba Inu is up enormously in that period. And we got a little more time here, so let's get to some of you really quickly with your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crypto questions. You guys hit us up. We try to field as many of you possibly can here. Let's get to this one. I like this handle, Crypto Tree. I don't know what a crypto tree would be. Perhaps it's the giving tree of crypto. It gives everyone crypto. Maybe it's just something that continues to grow like a lot of these crypto assets do. Either way, Crypto Tree wants to know, what level do Shiba Inu... Of course, this is the question. What level do Shiba Inu and Doge need to hit before we can expect to see options on them? Thank you for this program. Well, you're welcome for the program there, Crypto Tree. A lot of people do want to see options on Shiba and Doge. Obviously, these things are still trading. In the case of Shiba, fractions of a cent. And in the case of Doge, it's a few cents, but still shy of $1. In the traditional options world, people tend to look askance at options on underlyings that are under $5. It kind of depends on your frame of reference and your risk tolerance, what your cutoff point is for what you trade options on. Some people won't trade options on things below $10, some people $20, but $5 seems to be a pretty general line of demarcation for most people. So something in that ballpark would probably be a decent expectation. Again, that's just a launching off point. Obviously, options give you a lot of things. They give you leverage, and you don't really need a lot of leverage on an underlying that's a fraction of a cent or only really a fraction of $1. You can go buy the underlying, and that gives you a lot of leverage. You can put on enormous positions in these underlyings for very little outlay, hence their popularity. And also that kind of alleviates the need for options. So when the thing starts getting more expensive, certainly north of $5, and I use expensive in air quotes because it's hard to say $5 is really expensive, but still, that's usually the level where people will start considering trading options on an underlying. Look at some of the meme stocks that are trading fast and furious out there right now. A lot of them are $2, $3, $4, and they have very active options markets on there. So $5 is very much a loose a loose line of demarcation. But for traditional options traders, that's usually where they start to get interested. So at least north of $1. Let's put it that way, Crypto Tree. You got to get north of $1. And then we could start seeing. We saw Doge flirt with that back on Musk's infamous appearance on SNL now, then never really get back to those levels again. Can Shiba do it? That's $1 is a long way. If we get to $1 in Shiba Inu, there's going to be a lot of Shibu million and billionaires floating around out there, including some in our audience. So yeah, if we get to that, they're not going to need options at that point. They're probably going to be cashing out. But yeah, that's usually the levels where we need. Let's just use ballparks of got to be at least north of $1 and probably really closer to $5 to get a little bit more action on them. So yeah, a little bit of a ways to go. Crypto tree. A good question though. Nonetheless, Big Mac says, can you explain some more about why a product like, I keep calling it BITO, why BITO would lose approximately 1% per month to roll yield? I don't really get it. I'm sure many of your other listeners don't as well. Thank you. Well, Big Mac, I like your handle, making me hungry. Yeah, we just talked about this with SIMEON at the top of the show. He actually thought the numbers of 1% a month were maybe a little bit rich. He thought that was probably just in the initial launch period, and things have calmed down a little bit since then. So you can probably expect maybe more like 0.5% out there. But it's like I mentioned earlier, these products are investing in futures. And when you go out and look at most futures products, not all obviously, but most futures products have a slope that's called contango. If you don't know what that means, look it up. CONTANGO is the spelling. You can get some of our earlier archive episodes of programs like This Week in Futures Options to help you walk you through it as well. But effectively, that means the price of the futures as you go out farther in time are typically going to be more expensive. So if you have a product like BITO, where you're going out and let's say buying futures a month out or so, they're going to be a little bit more expensive than the futures that are expiring right now or expiring soon. And over time, as you hold those futures, they will lose some of that value as they approach that front month expiration point. So what effectively happens over time is you're buying futures a little bit farther down the curve that are a little bit more expensive, and then you're selling them when they get to that very front portion of the curve when they're at their cheapest. So if you keep doing that over and over again, depending on how frequently you rebalance your product, you're going to be losing some money as a result. And again, how much depends on a number of things. It depends on the slope of that futures term structure, how aggressive the contango is. There could be periods where a product like Bitcoin, when it starts moving around, when it's, let's say, moving, 10+% in a day or more, and things start getting really crazy out there, where you see those front futures actually start trading at a premium to the rest of the term structure out there. That's a situation called backwardation. Doesn't usually last that long, but in those environments, you're buying futures that are cheaper and then selling them at more expensive levels, and they get closer to the expiration to that more expensive level. So in that environment, which has happened and could easily happen again in Bitcoin futures, then you are seeing benefit. You could actually be making money on the roll yield out there. It's just in the normal environments, you should expect it to lose money. So this is the case with any ETF that attempts to use futures to replicate other positions out there. That's going to happen. You have to choose where you play on the term structure. The closer you get to the front month, the better it's going to track the underlying. What people want these things for is to track the underlying, right? So they want it to move as close to 1-to-1 as possible with the actual spot Bitcoin out there. So the front future is going to do that. That's why a lot of these ETFs play in the front contract. Of course, that comes with these roll issues. You're going to have to deal with that, and how much that costs you depends on the structure of the product and everything else. So if you start rolling and getting farther down the term structure a bit and buying even further out contracts and holding on to them a little bit longer, you may mitigate some of the impacts of that roll yield, but also you're not going to track as well. So there's no free lunch in the futures. If you want it to track well, you're probably going to suffer from some sort of roll yield. If you want to maybe protect yourself from some of that roll yield, it's probably not going to track as well. So it kind of depends what you want out there. You have to pick your poison out there. But that's effectively why products like that suffer from roll yield. Okay, let's do one more really quickly. Options Queen, one of our stalwarts there in the secret club. Good to see you in there live again, Options Queen. She says, can we talk about mana on the show? And she sent us a link from CNBC that says a little known cryptocurrency called mana spiked after Facebook changed its name to Meta. Mana is the native digital token of Decentraland, a self-proclaimed quote-unquote metaverse platform where users can buy and sell virtual properties. So this rebrand of Meta sounds like it sent a lot of business. 400% to the upside for this Mana, which is everyone's trying to stake their claim in the quote-unquote metaverse now. Facebook even changing their name to it, even though there's another company called Meta out there. So they're probably going to have to pay up a little money to get that name. But yeah, this is not obviously one that's been on my radar before. Options Queen, thanks for bringing it to our attention. It's Decentraland token, ticker symbol MANA, M-A-N-A, and it's trading at $3.10 right now. It's up 17% today, and it looks like it's been up about 400% since this whole Facebook rebrand happened. So getting back to our earlier question, it's closing in on the level. Maybe we could have some options on this thing. So that would be nice. I think we need a little bit more flow and a little bit more volume on it nonetheless. But that's a good one to bring to our attention, Options Queen. Maybe we'll have to keep an eye on it. And if it gets closer to cracking into the top 10, or in the case of today, the top 11, maybe we'll have to add it to our rundowns again going forward. All right, everybody, that music means we've come to the end of another crypto rundown. I want to thank Simeon for joining us over there from ProShares. Hopefully we tackled a lot of your questions about the hottest new product out there in the world of crypto, aka BITO. I need to beat that into my brain. BITO. If you have more questions, hit us up. We can always have them on again. They love to talk about this thing. Clearly, this is a hot product with many of you out there. Of course, if you're listening live, you can join us throughout the rest of the week for all the fun stuff we have going on this week. We have the Pro Q&A coming up tomorrow for all of our secret club members. Got another great one. We got John Brady joining us there from RJO to answer a lot of your futures options questions. I got a feeling more than a few of them are going to be asking about all things crypto. So we're probably going to get into that tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We had some great ones last week as well. If you want to learn more about that, of course, you know where to go. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro gets you the Pro Q&As, gets you our Options Oddities program at the end of the week on Friday, most of the live throughout the week as well. And if you like hot new products, Nanos, so the other hot thing coming in the world of options, the 1-to-1 option contract, aka no multiplier anymore. One option contract for one share of the underlying. Why the heck is SIBO doing this? What's the plan? We're going to find out tomorrow. We're going to talk to SIBO directly. So if you like talking about the hot new products like BITO today, going to get into it with them tomorrow on the network for Nano. So stay tuned for that. Should be fun. Then, of course, all the rest of our programming throughout the rest of the week. Education Wednesday, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Thursday back again for This Week in Futures Options. If you're listening to this show, you should be listening to that one. We get to crypto there as well. Of course, episode 2 of the Option Block Friday, Volatility Views, and for all of you in the Secret Club, Options Oddities. Then back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.